Siege machines have been one of the most pivotal and game-changing additions to Clash of Clans, and they do have quite an interesting history with all the different siege machines. So today we'll be going over this history and seeing how each new siege machine really changed the landscape of Clash of Clans. So the first siege machines will come out in June of 2018 with the addition of Town Hall 12, and the first two were the Wall Wrecker and the Battle Blimp. The Wall Wrecker was definitely the most popular one at the time because it literally destroyed walls as well as other buildings, and it was a great way to push into bases, and it also helped reduce the need for individual wall breakers. And this was big because that would help free up space for other troops, and it also was just good because walls are some of the most hated things in the game, so having an extra thing that doesn't actually take up any space in your army to destroy them was great. And as for the Blimp, well, it honestly wasn't really too popular at the beginning. While it was able to bypass walls by just flying over them, it didn't really do much damage like the Wall Wrecker did, and it wasn't really good for pushing into bases since obviously you would need to have an air army for that, but even so, it just wasn't really good for funneling as it moved pretty fast and nothing could keep up with it. And it obviously targeted the Town Hall, so there were even issues with the Grand Warden following the Blimp into the middle of the base, and that would cause your Warden to also essentially get wasted. However, that issue will be fixed later on, but as for the beginning, well, the Blimp honestly wasn't that great. However, as we know today, the Blimp plays a much bigger role and is very important. However, it will take years for it to get to that point, and we will talk about it later in the video. So initially, the Wall Wrecker was what you would see the most, and it was good with both ground and air attacks since, I mean, it was just a good amount of extra damage, and a lot of people would try to set it up so that it destroyed the most important defenses, whether this be like the Eagle Artillery or some Inferno Tower depending on the base layout as well as the attack strategy. A few months later in December, the next siege machine will be added to the game, and this one was a Stone Slammer, and it was a bit different than the previous siege machines. This one was a flying one like the Blimp. However, it didn't actually target the Town Hall, which is what made those siege machines pretty unique. Instead, the Stone Slammer just targeted defenses, and honestly, it was like a much better version of the balloon. The Stone Slammer looked like the balloons and it worked very similarly to them, however, it just had a ton more health, which was the opposite of the balloons, which had really low health. That would really be what made it a siege machine, as well as the fact that it held your clan castle troops, but that is pretty obvious. The Stone Slammer was pretty good for just funneling, and it was definitely more used for like air attacks, but it was good with a lot of different strategies. However, it definitely was more used in more niche situations. Meanwhile, the Wall Wrecker was good for just about anything. But 1 year later, in December 2019, you'll get an even more bizarre siege machine, and this was the Siege Barx. Now, this was something that didn't actually move at all since you deployed it once and then it would stay there until it ran out of health, whether that would be naturally over time or if it got destroyed by something. This would spawn in P.E.K.K.A.s and Wizards, and once destroyed, it would also spawn in your clan castle troops. So it was definitely the strangest siege machine, and it wasn't exactly all that popular at the beginning since it went against everything people really were expecting. However, over time, it would rise in popularity and is now something that does get used quite a lot, especially in the pro scene where the attacks are well calculated, since the biggest thing with the Siege Barx is really just timing. So at this point in the game, the Wall Wrecker and Stone Slammer were really like the most important and best siege machines in the game, with the Blimp and Siege Barx kind of being in the background and used by more pro players or just being used in more niche situations. However, it would be in October and December of 2020 in which the Super Archer and Super Wizard will be added, and these two troops would almost single-handedly make the Blimp the most popular siege machine. This is because these two troops would be really good when used with the invisibility spells and the Blimp. The whole strategy was really that you would send a Blimp into the base and deploy the troops at the core of the base and then use the invisibility spells to protect the troops, and they would basically just destroy stuff outside the invisibility spells because they're ranged and also did damage to more than one building for the most part. With the archers, you had their piercing arrows that would go in a straight line and deal damage to whatever buildings were in that line, and then for the wizards you would have their zap chain, which would just damage buildings close to each other, similar to how the Electro Dragon works. This would really help just shred through the cores of bases and get rid of the strongest defenses, and that would really set you up for you to use the rest of your army to destroy what was left. And this did become extremely popular and is something we see a lot today, and it is basically like the sole purpose of the Blimp, and that does just make it super important because this is a really strong attack strategy. However, this can also be a bit risky if you mess it up, since most attacks rely on this working, so if you mess up then you're essentially ruining the chances of a 3 or even 2 star because of how integral this part of the attack is. Either way, it would still be really popular and brought the siege machines into a whole new light since they were never that OP before. But in December of 2020, you would also get another siege machine, which was a log launcher, and this was extremely impactful as well. This was basically like a ranged wall wrecker because it served essentially the same function, except that it just shot logs in front of it. And this was better in my opinion since the logs could go through things and deal damage to multiple buildings, which was really good for taking out or just dealing damage to multiple defenses. And the log launcher would really just make the wall wrecker almost obsolete because there was never really a situation in which the wrecker was better than the launcher. So in December of 2020, there were basically like 2 extremely good siege machines now in the game, with the first being the Blimp and the second obviously being the launcher. And these 2 would really like be the icons for siege machines in the game and what most people saw on a day-to-day basis. And the Slammer and Barx were doing alright as they were mainly used in more niche situations and being used by the higher skill players, since those siege machines did just take a lot more skill in playing and the average player would rather stick with something easier. But another year later, in December 2021, we will get the Flame Flinger, and this has really been one of the best siege machines in the game. It has a really long range and can really like just clear out compartments just by itself. It shoots a fireball and leaves the ground burning for a while, and this slowly does damage to whatever's inside that fire, and to kind of balance it out, the Flame Flinger also loses health over time. And this is something that has just been gaining popularity over time as more and more people have been moving away from the launcher and Blimp. Plus, at higher town hall levels, the Flame Flinger does just come in handy since it is really nice to be able to destroy a compartment for these bases, and that lets you just focus on everything else. The biggest downfall of the Flame Flinger is the mortar, since it has a higher range and is typically put towards the outsides of bases. And it really was the Flame Flinger that actually gave the mortar purpose, since before this, the mortar was completely useless. And even though it still does really suck today, at least it has one use case, which is for the Flame Flingers. And at this point in the game, all of these machines were honestly pretty good and well known, with the exception of the Wall Wrecker, since that honestly still wasn't really that good, and personally I don't think it ever really will be good unless the Log Launcher gets some big nerfs or something. But anyways, this brings us to the latest siege machine in the game, and that is the Battle Drill, which came out in October of 2022. This one is really unique since it goes underground and it is basically like a miner. It also targets defenses, which is interesting, and overall it is a really cool siege machine. However, it isn't exactly the best or most useful, and you don't see it very often. It is more so just used for fun and I suppose some very neat situations, but overall it is at around the bottom when it comes to ranking the siege machines. And we have seen that there was a pattern of a new siege machine towards the end of every year. However, we didn't get one in 2023, which really broke that pattern. I believe it is most likely due to the Town Hall 16 and hero equipment, as that did add a lot to the game and another siege machine wouldn't be necessary with the hero equipment. But I am interested in seeing if we will get another siege machine later this year, since theoretically it should happen and could possibly be something that comes out with Town Hall 17. But anyways, that was the history of the siege machines inside the game. I really hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next video.